Welcome everyone. We're gonna start the room pretty soon. Today we have our keynote speakers, Terry Milewski and Dr. Aparna Pande. So stick around. Let the more people join. Hey Puneet.
Hello,
Um,
good morning, namaste.
namaste. Good morning. Sat Sri Akal.
Yeah, Sat Sri Akal. So really looking forward to this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Started pinging in. Parth is in another room. He's also bringing people in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Pumpji is raising his hand. Pumpji, this is not like a usual thing where we have everybody speak. Today we have like a special room where we have special guests. So they would be doing most of the talking. And in like the later part, like we have this event for I would say at least 90 minutes. So I would say in the last like 10-15% or 10-15 minutes of the talk, then we would have like audience questions. But this one is not like a general discussion for everyone. Hi Terry, welcome.
Good morning, Terry. Welcome.
Terry, if you're speaking, your voice is, your mic is on mute.
All right, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I hear you fine too.
Yeah, just below Darshanji was here, where he went. He's also like a very eminent gentleman from Canada, and he's involved a lot in like philanthropy and stuff like that. So, oh, Aparna ji is here. Good morning, ma'am. How are
Morning, how are
you?
you?
Doing very well.
Good morning, Aparna. It's Terry here
Morning, Terry, how are you doing?
I'm in faraway Quebec in the snowy mountains opposite
Ah,
away from Ottawa, out in the woods.
well, good to hear from you. And, your report was excellent. Your report is the reason we prepared our report.
Yeah, and if I had had your man and woman power, I would have written a better one. You can.
No, your report was wonderful. It's just that we sort of, my senior sort of, my sort of Hudson colleagues and all, we said, let's try and bring more people in so that it's not just a Hudson report. It's everybody who works on this area that we can possibly find who could join the report, because that gives it more power.
Yes, but that cruelly exposed the gaps in my own report.
No, but sort of, I mean, it was great what you did. It was one person, and you did an amazing report. We tried to sort of follow you and do something so that there was something on a subject which needed attention, and unfortunately hasn't got that much of attention.
Well, it's getting a little bit more now, thanks to Puneet is always busy, and we got him on the run.
Aparna ji,
That is
actually,
that's important.
sorry to
No.
interrupt. There is something we can also help like both of you. So what I was really impressed by while reading your report was in this references, and you had gone into books written in Urdu by Pakistanis, because
Of
that's
course.
where all the
Yeah.
propaganda happens. So I
Yeah.
was very impressed with that.
No,
Now
but
with
sort of,
Khalistan,
that's I mean, sort of, there's a lot all of us know which is out in the, in the media, which is out in the public, but it's when you're able to bring in the, sort of go back in history and, pull out from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, when you can pull out from writings, when you can pull out from, government documents or archives and things like that to demonstrate, then it's much easier, and it gives weightage to the report.
right? And with this Khalistanis, they are actually writing a lot of this nonsense. Most of all, even like this Khalsa aid. So in English, it's actually a very sanitized version. But in
Yeah, of
Punjabi
course.
and Gurmukhi, it's
Of course.
incredible how much hate it is. If
Yeah.
anybody basically like reads what they say in a Gurdwara in Punjabi or like these posters they present, there is a very strong case for hate speech against them, and like these people can be set right. But
Yeah,
you know, they put like two different
but
narratives.
that's
One is in English for white
yes.
people, and one is for us. You know.
Yeah, but that happens everywhere, right? I mean, sort of, if you sort of, if you look at the media in many countries, what comes out, what is in English is very different from what is actually in the local language, because the presumption is that most people around the world don't know that language, can't read that language or understand it. So they'd only go by what is presented to them, or they get to know in English. So it's used.
Right, you know, even in Tenny's Quillette report, you know, he basically exposed like in Punjabi where they're basically going out and giving money to this mass murderer like Khalsa Raid, which is apparently like a charity. And they basically had no answer. So they just like, of course, abused Terry, or like, but they had no answer to like Terry's investigation, you know.
Yeah.
And they deleted their tweets, which cleverly did not tag me. The death threat by Ranveer Singh, for example, was simply quietly deleted after that Quillette article was published. And at the time, he didn't tag me. So how do you issue a death threat against somebody if they don't know? What's the point? And of course, the point is for brownie points within the peer group, within the bubble.
And I don't know how much time we would have to go into it, but Dr. Pandey, you know, I was reading you focus so much on geopolitics, also China. You know, what's fascinating is, you know, like how, like, what do you say? Like Pakistan is so destabilized. Like right now, we don't know what's going to happen there. And also, you know, like this Pannu, this clown guy, he was basically saying what happened in Crimea should be done here. Like Crimea should be an example, which is a very interesting thing given now what is happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll touch on geopolitics a little bit only because I believe that, you know, one of the reasons that there has been an uptick um, by groups which are sort of, you know, supported by the Pakistani intelligence, why they are sort of, you know, indulging in Khalistani or in supporting activities like this or in anti-Indian activities is primarily because they believe that they want to take sort of they want to target the India-US relationship, and so their attempt is to try to undermine the India-US relationship, and therefore sort of try and show India in a negative light, and create problems for India. And that's why they're using the current opportunity when India is closer to the United States, when it's part of Quad, to sort of, you know, highlight such issues. And that's why it's even more important for US government and its entities to actually examine these groups and examine the links between them and Pakistan's deep state.
Harry, like I was actually surprised, and again, this from Dr. Pandey's report. Like I didn't notice it the first time, but basically SFJ's embassy, they have registered. Like when they registered it, they gave it some ashram in California. But now on their website, they have put it on like some Gurdwara in DC. Right.
Yes, yes, yes,
That's very interesting.
yes, yes, it is.
Wasn't there some dispute in California about it, and they got kicked out?
But they gave name of an ashram, like you know, as like when they registered like this embassy on
Mm.
papers. And but when they put on website, of course, they can't put an ashram, so they put like this DC Gurdwara as their office.
Huh.
We are at the 5 minute mark. Do you want to wait one more minute? I'm 4 minute mark. Do you want to wait one more minute before starting?
Yeah, just one more minute will be okay if others are okay with it.
I'm seeing
Yeah,
more
yeah.
faces. I'm seeing more people appear on my screen.
Okay, then we can go ahead then if others are okay with it.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Somebody's mic is not muted. Can you mute yourself? Yeah, okay, thank you. Wait, let me get just a minute. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I welcome you all to this room and in the club Seva. The topic is going to be on Khalistan, as a project of Pakistan. And to run this room, we have two very distinguished guests with us. One is Dr. Aparna Pande, who is the director of Hudson Institute's initiative on the future of India and South Asia. The institute is based in the Washington, D.C. region. It's a think tank. And Dr. Pande there cannot be anyone better than Pande to speak about this topic. She was awarded her PhD for her work on Pakistan's foreign policy, and her major areas of focus and interest are South Asia, with a particular focus and interest on India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, foreign and security policy. She has authored several books, the most recent one being Making India Great, The Promise of a Reluctant Global Power, which came out as recently as in 2020. And most relevant to the topic of this room, in the year 2021, she co-authored a very special report from the Hudson Institute. It was titled Pakistan's Destabilization Playbook, Khalistan Separatist Activism within the US. Her co-authors were Mr. Hossein Haqqani, and Dr. Christine Fair, Mr. Sam Westrop, and a few others. So it's a great honor to have her here, and equally honored to have our other distinguished guest, Mr. Telly Milewski. Mr. Milewski was the face of the Canadian national broadcaster CBC for a very long time, until his recent retirement. And he has been particularly brave and shown his valor in hunting down the story of Khalistani terrorism as it has been originating in Canada. And he's well known for his coverage of the bombing of the Indian airliner Air India 182 in 1985, which many of us might be familiar with. It killed around 329 people. It was a mid-air incident, or 80 of whom were children under the age of 12, were going back to their families during summer break. It's an incident that will be etched in the memories of all those victims, as well as those peace-loving citizens all over the world, particularly from India and Canada. In 2007, he made the excellent CBC documentary Sikh Politics in Canada, and he authored the report Khalistan, a project of Pakistan for the MacDonald Laurier Institute. And more recently, he has authored the book, a fantastic book, I may say, Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. So, with that, on that note, I would also like to introduce to you the main moderator for this event, Mr. Puneet Sahani. Mr. Puneet Sahani is the one who introduced us to this club. He's a loud, informed voice against Khalistani terrorism today, a proud Sikh, and he's a coordinator of SEVA. And without Mr. Puneet Sahani's help, this room would not have been possible. And the same goes to our other coordinator and moderator, Mr. San, and a few others. So on that note, I thank you all for being here. And I now pass the mic on to Mr. Puneet. Puneetji, it's up to you. Go ahead.
Hello, namaste, good evening to everyone, wherever you are. Very happy to have both of us. So, just a few things. We won't be like having people up on stage, at least for the part like while we are having this discussion. So, the rough outline is we will go for about 90 minutes, and 70, 80 minutes would be like we will be Aparna, Dr. Pandey, and Terry would be talking about their papers and the questions our team has for them. And then we will have audience questions. So if you have questions, please back channel those questions to San or Parth, and we'll try to include as many as possible. So we'll start with Dr. Pandey. Dr. Pandey, if you could please go about your report, a few minutes about themselves. And we have a lot of questions as well, but maybe the stage is yours. Please share your report with our audience.
Thank you, Puneet, Parth and San. Thanks for inviting me. And actually, it's a pleasure to be on the same session and panel as Mr. Milewski. It is his report that was the inspiration for me and my colleagues to prepare our report. I'll just speak for about 4-5 minutes and then happy to answer any questions. Some in the United States consider the global war on terrorism to have ended with the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. But for America's allies in Asia, especially India, terrorism remains front and center as a key concern. And if Washington really truly seeks Delhi's support in the countering Chinese aggression, Delhi needs American appreciation and support for the multitude of terrorism-related threats that India faces. While American policymakers do speak of violence in Kashmir, they have largely ignored support for Khalistan, a separatist movement that instigated an extremely violent insurgency in Punjab for over a decade, starting from the late 1970s. Khalistani militants from among the vast Punjabi diaspora located in North America were responsible for many terrorism-related incidents, including the one that Parth mentioned earlier, the 1985 bombing of an Air India transport plane. And allowing such militants to organize unchecked again could lead to further tragedies. While the domestic roots of Khalistani militancy are subject to debate, it is accepted widely that the movement received support and still receives support from Pakistan's security establishment, especially its inter-services intelligence. In order to investigate this support, its history, and what is currently happening, we actually at Hudson prepared a report. And we examined the activities of US-based Khalistan groups, their links to pro-Pakistan Kashmiri separatist groups, their ties to militant and terror groups inside India. Our report documents available evidence on support received by these US-based groups from entities and individuals linked to Pakistan. The reason we did this is that Pakistan's support for Islamist radicalism is well documented. It's well understood around the world. But Pakistan-backed terrorism in Punjab does not receive attention in policy circles. Now, during the Cold War, the United States was unwilling to embarrass its ally Pakistan, and it's only in the 1990s that the United States finally acknowledged Pakistan's support for Khalistani terrorists. But what our report shows, the Hudson Institute report, that Pakistan's support for insurgent movements inside India dates back to 1950s, and it's part of a strategy to exploit India's religious, political, ethnic fault lines by supporting violent, extremist, separatist movements from across parts of India. A lot of it has to do with 1971 and the loss of East Pakistan. For Pakistan's military intelligence establishment, seeking revenge by quote-unquote bleeding India with 1,000 cuts is part of the strategy. It's interesting that if you look at the maps of the original Khalistan movement, they include not just parts of present-day India, but large parts of present-day Pakistan that have areas religiously important to Sikhs. However, Khalistani groups seeking to curry favor from Pakistan limit their territorial demand to the Indian state of Punjab. This shows where they lie and where they get their support from. While Pakistan has often shown reluctance to protect its own religious minorities, it has shown no compunction in using Sikh shrines on its side of the border to support the Khalistan cause. This varies from the Evacuee Trust Property Board, Pakistan Sikh Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, all headed by retired Pakistani military or intelligence officers. In 2018, about 4 years ago, India agreed to open the Kartarpur corridor, basically a visa-free corridor to allow Sikh pilgrims to visit holy shrines. However, an official Pakistani video during the opening ceremony featured photos of 3 Khalistani separatists leaders killed in 1984 during Operation Blue Star. Now, the Khalistan insurgency has no real support inside India, but it still has support with some elements of the diaspora. And the last few years have witnessed a rise in Khalistan-related anti-India activism within the US. Our research showed that a large number of Khalistani and Kashmiri activists operate in tandem over the last 4-5 years. Since 2017, they've organized joint protests, joint demonstrations, rallies, held speeches, every time any high-level Indian official comes to the United States. It's also no coincidence that this is happening at a time when India and US are deepening their strategic collaboration. Pakistan, a Chinese ally, has a vested interest in weakening India's relations with the United States. And therefore, one of the samples of this, examples would be that a prominent active Khalistani separatist group actually published open letters in 2020 to leaders of Russia, China and Pakistan requesting support for the Khalistani cause. At the end of the day, anticipation is critical to national security planning. And so, what the Hudson Institute report does is we call upon US law enforcement to ensure that ostensibly peaceful pro-Khalistani activism does not become the precursor of a new wave of violence inside India. And therefore, we call upon the US government to undertake a number of actions, including things like include all groups responsible for terrorist attacks in India in the list of designated global terror groups. Designate as terrorists any individuals in India and that the Indian and US intelligence and law enforcement have established as being connected to designated terror entities. Apply terror financing laws and regulations to various groups that espouse Kashmiri and Khalistani separatism. Investigate US based groups espousing Kashmiri and Khalistani separatism for possible violations of US laws related to foreign funding. And use legal means established specifically to combat terrorism, monitor Kashmiri and Khalistani terrorist sympathizers and advocates. I will stop there and now hand it back to Puneet. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So I have a lot of questions and a lot of compliments for you. But Terry, would you have anything before I take the time? Do you have any comments for Dr. Pande's report or her presentation?
Sorry, my microphone was off. I'll just make a couple of quick comments. I think that's a very comprehensive summary of the really quite excellent report which the Hudson Institute used to expose cruelly the gaps in my own report. I'm still mad about it. Um, the um, the first thing that I think is worth remembering in this whole discussion is the primacy of lies. What I mean by that is that, as we're seeing now in Ukraine, the sort of wanton and unprovoked use of force uh, usually involves lies. And of course, that's also true in the case of the Khalistan movement. And I just wanted to mention a couple that I think will come up repeatedly in this discussion. The first being the lie that is still propagated widely that the Khalistanis speak for the Sikhs. They are the voice of the world's Sikhs. So that if you criticize Khalistanis or condemn Khalistani violence and terrorism, you are accused of being against Sikhs. You are anti Sikh. If that's true, then most Sikhs apparently are anti Sikh. And I think for Western listeners, I don't know how many there are today, but for Western listeners who live in the world where the loudest Sikh voices claim to be speaking for all Sikhs when they endorse the idea of an independent Khalistan, uh, that's what they hear. But what they're hearing is not true. And I mentioned, I've mentioned before, and I probably will again, the 0.32% of the vote that the only separatist party, Simranjit Singh Man's splinter group of the Shiromani Akali Dal, the Amritsar splinter group, that they got in the 2017 Punjab elections, which a total which greatly increased in the most recent Punjab election, in which they won 8 times as many votes, 2.5% of the votes. Of course, if you increase from a tiny fraction to a slightly less tiny fraction, you still have a tiny fraction and you still have no seats. But I think that goes some way to showing those who may have heard these claims that Khalistanis are the voice of the Sikhs, that may go to show that it just isn't so. That where most Sikhs live in Punjab, millions of them have no interest whatsoever in an independent Khalistan, and they proved it again and again and again. The second lie that I will mention, there are many, I'll just mention these two, is the notion, which again is still alive, that all atrocities in this conflict were committed by the other guys. That it was the Indian state the Indian police, the Indian army that committed all the atrocities. We didn't do any. And all of the dead policemen, the 1,400 dead policemen in Punjab, all of their family members, hundreds of their family members who were killed by Khalistani gunmen, that somehow they were killed by the Indian state. That should be thrown out with the trash as well. The other comment I'll make by way of introduction here is on the central issue of Pakistan's involvement. As I say, Aparna has already gone over the basics here. Let me just mention again just two brief facts that could be borne in mind. The first is, and this I think is mentioned in the Hausen Institute's excellent report, is and I mention it because it's kind of amusing. That is the comment of Hamid Gul, of course, the former chief of the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, the ISI, who was infuriated by Benazir Bhutto's attempts at a rapprochement with India to the point that he denounced her. He denounced his own prime minister for allegedly revealing to the hated Indian authorities the names of Sikh separatists who were cooperating with the ISI in Pakistan. And why I suggest to you that that's darkly amusing is because, of course, Pakistan most of the time tries to deny that there are any Sikh terrorists cooperating with the Pakistani ISI. And here was Hamid Gul caught out in the open complaining that the Prime Minister of Pakistan had revealed the names of these terrorists who allegedly, up until then anyway, did not exist. And then finally, I'll mention the compelling evidence presented by the death of the most notorious Sikh terrorist, certainly the most notorious in Canada, Talvinder Singh Parmar. Parmar, of course, was, as many of our listeners today will know, was clearly the mastermind, the architect of the Air India bombing. Actually, the Air India bombings, plural, there were meant to be two simultaneous explosions destroying two Indian planes on opposite sides of the globe at the same time. One of them went off early at the airport in Tokyo, at Narita Airport, and killed two baggage handlers, injured four others. And the other, of course, destroyed Flight 182, Air India 182, off the coast of Ireland. That was June 23rd of 1985. And the death of Parmar gives the lie to these stories that, oh, well, he was tortured, he was forced to confess, it was a false confession, he was a hero, he's a martyr, he's a model for Sikh youth. This is heard loudly and often today, and all of it is flat out lies. Parmar was shown conclusively again and again and again in the Canadian judicial proceedings to be the author of this massacre, in which a total of 331 people died. And he is nevertheless worshipped as a hero with life-size portraits plastered on the outside of an important Gurdwara in British Columbia. He is honored as a martyr. And this, his death, just happens to have occurred in October of 1992. We're coming up on 30 years now since this happened. He was with two Pakistani agents when he died. There were six men in two cars. An informer ratted them out to the Punjab police, and very briefly, they scrambled out of the car when they were challenged, firing wildly, ran into the lentil fields where they died. They were outgunned. The police were expecting them. They knew they were coming. And all six died, and the bodies were laid out by the side of the road. They asked the villagers who had heard the shooting and witnessed the shootout if they could identify them. They identified all of them. Two of them were Pakistani agents, and their identities were acknowledged. by the government of Pakistan, although they said that they were completely innocent tourists, I quote. If so, these tourists had a rocket launcher in their car and bundles of American currency, $100 bills, as well as plentiful ammunition, grenades, AK 47s, and an antique machine gun with a drum magazine. So, obviously, typical tourists out to see the sights of the little dusty village of Kang Arayan in Punjab. So I mentioned these facts, they're inescapable facts, simply to make the point that you can go on and on if you're a Pakistani supporter saying that it's all lies. In fact, the Pakistani High Commission in Ottawa did say it's all lies when I published a report about all of this, the one that led Aparna to write hers. And they said it was a pack of lies, but they omitted to mention what exactly was untrue about any of it. They just said it was a pack of lies. They didn't say what the lies were. So I mention all of these facts just to get a few things on the table to illustrate. You know, there may be many who tuned in to join this clubhouse today who have heard that these lies are false, that they're untrue, but there are still far too many people who only know the lies of the Khalistanis who survive today, saying that we had nothing to do with any atrocities, we didn't do the Air India bombing, we're the innocent and oppressed party in all of this, and we have nothing to do with Pakistan. Heavens no, it's entirely independent of any Pakistan involvement. So I thought those are just a couple of points, and I'm sure it'll be much more interesting when we come to the questions. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Terry. So, Madam's report, I really liked it. And what I really liked, she basically went into, for example, Harun Rashid's book in Urdu, and, basically how Pakistanis have acknowledged how they funded this Khalistani terrorism. And also some very interesting points. It's not just like this military people had this Pakistani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, but one time when there was not, so this military guy, Khatak, he went to the court because he said like the precedent is like this military guys are the chief. So it should be like some cash cow or something for them. So, that was also brought out in the report. So, ma'am, uh, maybe like you summarize what I would really liked, and what your report really brought out really beautifully was how, for example, this Kashmiri group, for example, this FI group, how they have infiltrated the congressmen, and they basically spread at the same time. And what was this other guy's name who was in all these Khalistani groups and accusing Indians of all genocide and what they're doing. So how they are basically like working in unison, and this FI group and the others stand with Kashmir, and they're basically merged with all this Khalsa aid, and they are affecting like not just like I would say mostly Democrat, but there are also some Republican Democrats as well. I think Rohrabacher, Dana Rohrabacher, who are like basically working as repeating the propaganda of Pakistan.
Thanks, Puneet. Sort of just one quick comment. Mr. Milewski, I agree with all the points you made, and all of them are valid. And I really wish people actually kept some of your points about, the falsehoods in mind, because those are very prevalent. But you've sort of, in a short period of time, you actually slayed all those falsehoods. Puneet, yes, so thanks. The attempt was to show that it is not just some random individuals or just one organization or two or something which happened in the 1990s but has now died down, but to show that one, these groups still exist. Some of them are older groups, some of them are recent ones, and that they have coordinated. Now, there is no reason, ostensibly, if you are sort of a, let's say, the United States allows you to be, to espouse any cause in the world. You can espouse freedom for any country. You can, sort of talk about and craft a country and espouse the cause, as long as you do it democratically and you don't get funding from, from intelligence services of other countries. But in this case, what is shown is that the Khalistani and the Kashmiri activists are working together. along with other, in some cases, even Islamist radical groups, because their aim is not actually quote unquote Khalistan, their aim is to strike at India. So, any way that they can do it, whether it is sort of, so I'm sure all of you have watched videos in which you'll see these Khalistani activists saying, you know, sort of saying either Allahu Akbar or chanting, Pakistan, Zindabad and all. And that makes no sense if you were really, truly, quote unquote, a Khalistani activist. It only makes sense if your aim is to target India, and basically your aim is to target India in a way that the Pakistani deep states wants you to. So you organize truck rallies, you sort of, you organize demonstrations and protests at whenever India's independence or Republic Day movement, whenever the Prime Minister or top representatives come. You sort of, you target India, you hold hearings, you hold, webinars and events with the Embassy of Pakistan or with its consulates. So all of these show that sort of, show the link to Pakistan, and your support from Pakistan, sort of, which is almost impossible to hide.
Yeah, and Dr. Pandey, I would also like what was really interesting was, I didn't know about that this LTT, which was this Tamil terrorist organization in Sri Lanka, they also, went about this referendum route, and SFJ is also trying. And they always talk about Punjabis, but I think I really hope whichever journalist or, like writes report, they should ask this Khalistanis. This problem, this violence started in 78 when they killed this Nirankaris. So the Nirankaris are also Punjabis. Do they have a right to vote or not? Like, do they have a right to their religion or not? These people have been, if you look at all these terrorists, so for example, Terry mentioned policemen were killed. One of this guy whose name is Sukhdev Babbar. So he basically gave interviews to everyone, to Shekhar Gupta from India, from Terry Glavin in Canada. And they proudly said, yes, it's a duty to murder, and this guy has murdered 30 Nirankaris, and this guy has murdered so many Nirankaris. And these people talk about, democratic rights and something. And, his picture is basically in all Gurudwaras. So, and, again, when they talk about Khalistan, just to say, like this Indian Punjab that we have, that was basically British Punjab. Maharaja Ranjit Singh Punjab was basically Punjab of Pakistan. It's like maybe 10% is in India, like this Amritsar thing. So that is, if you want to write Khalsa Raj, that's in Pakistan. Now, again, if you look at it, even in Amritsar, the city where the Golden Temple is, more Hindus live in that city than Sikhs. So again, they go about this foolish thing, which has basically no basis. And I would just say, like this whole thing of Khalistan and this Sikh violence, it basically started with killing sectarian killings of people you thought they were heretics, who had done you nothing wrong. And that killings went on for like almost a decade. And the other side never actually killed because they were like, they had no recourse to violence. So Nirankaris basically, they have left Punjab, they're living in south of India, so you only see their temples. Or they practice their faith like Ahmadis, like in secret, and nobody talks about it.
Agreed. But it is, that is how, that is how extremist groups or radical groups in any, I would say, ethnicity or faith behave, right? First, you sort of, if you believe that, that your path is pure and everybody else has to, in quote unquote, pass through the eye of the needle, then the first people you need to get rid of are the people who disagree with you within your own ethnicity, within your own national sort of, nationalism, or within your own religion. So it's happening. You can see that in, it's happened in Christianity, it's happened in Islam, and sort of it has also hit Sikhism, and at some level there's an impact even within Hinduism. So all faiths, there is a problem. The more you try to make it exclusive, the more you try to say that my way is the only way, you first try to eliminate those within your own religion, ethnicity, and then you try to tell the world that this is what it stands for. So it is unfortunate, and yes, what you're saying is true. Any people who didn't agree with a certain view were the ones who were first killed and eliminated, just as sort of the Khalistani sentiment isn't dominant within India, nor is it dominant within the large Sikh diaspora around the world. But there are attempts to show that, as Terry said earlier, that there are attempts to falsely show that every Sikh supports or is sympathetic towards the Khalistani cause, which is wrong. They are not. But sort of, they are either with their attempts to show that, and those who don't agree are then targeted directly, indirectly, and that too is problematic.
Could I add one point just to mention that uh, the founding father, if you will, for many Khalistanis of their movement, Bindranwale, uh, obviously the most famous figure in the movement, he was a religious fanatic. It's often forgotten since he's been elevated to the status of the Saint of Khalistan. It's often forgotten that when he got his start, he was not a Khalistani. He was not a politician. He was a religious fanatic and a Puritan. He lectured on how Hindus were terrible. He lectured against the Nirankaris. He lectured about the importance of doing without tobacco and alcohol. He was a religious fanatic and Puritan. And if you asked him about Khalistan, he said, "Well, sure, that'd be nice," but he didn't make that his subject. And one of the things I wrote about uh, previously is his encounter with Ujjwal Assange, who, as you know, was a very prominent politician of Sikh origin in Canada, rose to be a federal cabinet minister, and was always a fierce critic of the Khalistanis, including when it was too dangerous and he was nearly beaten to death as a result. Assange actually traveled, I guess this would have been 1983 or 84, to Amritsar to show his sons around. And they asked, why are the guns in the temple? And he said, well, good question. Let's go and ask Bindranwale. And he challenged Bindranwale to a discussion in front of everybody. And he asked him about Khalistan, and Bindranwale didn't want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about the fact that Assange had cut his hair. That was what was really important to him, not Khalistan. So it's important to emphasize, and I think you're both right on this point, it's an important point, that this movement, like so many others, has its roots in religious fanaticism. It wasn't about Khalistan in the original. The Khalistanis latched onto this and made Bindranwale the saint of Khalistan. But he himself was simply preaching the old time religion.
Absolutely right, Terry. And Aparna ji, I'll actually bring your notice to this. Like this is a thing, like, for example, Bhindranwale was running this religious seminary that goes back to like 18th century. So, I was reading your colleague's paper, Dr. Christine Fair's paper. She had written on another thing, like on like two sieges, comparing Blue Star to Black Thunder. And in that, she posts like this by Harjot Oberoi. So if people don't know about Harjot Oberoi, he's maybe the greatest Sikh scholar alive. He wrote a book in 1994 about how this religion was twisted under British rule. It's called The Construction of Religious Boundaries in Sikhism. It's the most. It's been like I don't know, like 27 years, but nothing of comparative like shock has come, and he has faced so much pressure. I think after that he never published a book because he had to face so much opprobrium. He just published a book this year, but you just read him and you just like amazed by this scholar, like greatest scholar. So I found Christine Fairs and Harjot Oberoi saying actually this claim is actually completely bogus. But where does that claim, where he says that he doesn't say it in any research paper because he's so afraid. He says it in like this Marty and Appleby. They are very famous people who, compile from Chicago. So with great difficulty, I find, like this Marty and Appleby like fundamentalism. And in that, he talks about, of course, this. And he's talking about, oh, I was presenting this presentation at a university, but somebody stole that and made it public. So you see, this is how they harass people. A scholar, if he says he wants this information to spread, but this guy, Harjot Oberoi, who's like the greatest Sikh scholar, he was basically going and saying things, like in small groups. and he was worried that these things were going out. Anyways, he makes out this claim that this is completely bogus. Like before 1970s, nobody had heard about this what do you say, Bhindranwale or his Taksal or something. So they just make fantastical claims, and they bully everyone. So if you want to believe like Bhindranwale's claim after he died, the same his same like seminary, which is called Damdami Taksal, till 2003, every year on Blue Star anniversary, they came out and made a statement that Bhindranwale is alive, and they said he's anonymous and great men come at the right time to take command of their nation. So they're complete liars. So there is also no basis to it that this was some special seminary. And thanks to your colleague Dr. Christine Fair, I basically was able to trace it out, and I had like a good scholar who basically demolished this entire claim.
Wonderful. I mean, Chris, Dr. Fair works on these issues. She goes into depth. One of the reasons our our report was so sort of deep and research laden was because of what Dr. Fair has done. And this is an area she has worked on for years. And so I'm glad that one of her reports helped clarify issues. And I'm sure she would be a wonderful speaker if you would like to call her sometime on this and other related issues, Puneet.
Yes, ma'am. And like again, going back to your report, there is so much I want to discuss about it. There's also you make a very interesting claim. This Chawla, this guy, who is basically this Pakistani guy. And actually, there is a video of him when he was barred, and he's complaining to Pakistanis, and he said, "Meri to kutte barabar bhi izzat nahi rakhi." You did. So he's basically, I don't want to use the word, but by his own words, he's kind of like the lapdog of this Pakistani agencies, and he's saying, Inshallah, India would be destroyed or whatever, Khalistan would be made. I want to make a very interesting observation that a Sikh guy who had gone to Pakistan and he made it to me. These things don't come in statistics, but it's very revealing. So he says, like if you look at the Sikh minority, they're an educated minority, right? So they are doctors or something like that. So wherever you look at Sikh Indian immigrants in general, they live in niche neighborhoods or this like that. And he said, what I found was really shocking was, these people are successful, but they are living in, abysmal conditions inside the Gurdwara. Like if you have a practice, if you can run, you will live in like a proper house. Why would you live like, in a hospice like a Gurdwara? And he said, okay, fine, India is bad. You are saying all this Khalistan Zindabad, whatever, Pakistan Zindabad. But tell me, like, why don't you go and live in like a normal neighborhood? Why are you living with your families inside Gurdwaras? And then it came out of their mouth. It's like, no, 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 no. We cannot live inside a Muslim mohalla because they know their daughters will be abducted or something like that. So you see, it's not just like the poor sevadars. It's even the educated doctors who are like, who have to take refuge in the Gurdwaras in Pakistan.
But that I agree, Puneet. But that is actually for any if you are not a Sunni Punjabi, and I'm sure Terry will agree with me on this. If you're not a Sunni Punjabi and maybe a Sunni Punjabi male, you have a problem in Pakistan. You are under threat. Almost sort of if you are Shia, you are threatened. If you're Ahmadi, you are not recognized as Muslim, and because you believe you are Muslim, you cannot therefore participate in elections or politics because your faith doesn't let you agree or accept that you are not a Muslim, but the Pakistani state doesn't recognize you as a Muslim. If you are a Hindu or a Christian or a Sikh, you have problems in Pakistan. Sort of depending on where you are, you may be lynched, you may be attacked, your daughters may be abducted. And so sort of any non-Muslim minority, and especially and within Muslims, even if you are Shias or Ahmadis, you really have no protection. Sort of not just regular attacks, but Pakistan's blasphemy laws target minorities primarily. They target Ahmadis, sometimes Shias, but they target primarily Christians and then Hindus. So I can understand why they are living inside compounds. Whether it would be a Gurdwara compound or it would be, sort of in the case of Hindus and Sikhs, you can't even live inside the church or the temple. But Pakistan's religious minorities and actually even Pakistan's ethnic minorities are under threat in that country.
And of course, they know it to the point that let's not forget that the Sikh population of Pakistan has declined precipitously, and has been declining ever since partition in '47, to the point that where there were once over pre-partition Punjab, couple of million. Now there are fewer than 10,000 probably in Pakistan. In fact, I don't know the number because we don't really have an accurate number because a lot of Sikhs don't want to be identified. They want to be anonymous. They want to hide. And the numbers may be down to just a few thousand now in Pakistan. And of course, there is a reason for that. And don't forget poor old Ranjit Singh, the leader of the great Sikh empire, which many Khalistanis seek to re-establish. It only lasted 40 years, but the empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh is held up as the example of how we used to be sovereign. Well, his statue in Lahore has been vandalized. What is it, 3 times already? It's only been up 2 or 3 years, and it's been knocked down and smashed by my count about 3 times already. So there's not much respect, is there, in Pakistan, which is supposed to be the savior of the Khalistan movement, to the point that the Khalistanis, as has already been pointed out, make no claims on Pakistani Punjab, only on Indian Punjab.
Yeah, I will add, ma'am. So your report was great, and in the end, it concludes with some recommendations. If one recommendation, if I may suggest, like, and that could be done, like, so for example, Terry, he made this excellent documentary, like Sikh politics in Canada. So these people have basically captured gurdwaras by thuggery, and that's basically is their cash cow. They get like $1 million or like multinational funding or something, and that's where all this radicalization happens. So it's not just in Punjabi, where they spew hate speech. To take one example, they have this picture of this guy Jinda, right? So he was the guy who murdered the Indian Army chief. Now that's in basically almost 100% of Khalistani Gurdwaras and 90% of general Gurdwaras, because Khalistanis have captured 90% of Gurdwaras in this. So this guy, he has basically not just murdered the Indian Army chief and done so many killings and dacoities. Actually, in 1987, these guys published like a social reform movement, which was basically a Taliban movement, and they succeeded. That everybody should wear this Taliban uniform, nobody should sing Jan Gan Man, and which is the national anthem, and you can't speak Hindi, and etc. etc. But anyways, he published a poster, and I have a translation of that poster translated by the head of political science department of Guru Nanak Dev University, and in that, and it is signed by Jinda, the same guy who has killed basically, what do you say, this Indian army chief. And they are, and he used to say, for example, anybody who will go to Mata's Jagrata, or anybody who will go to a dera, or anybody who, we will burn him alive if you do this. So he's basically, if you read that, it's not public. I found it with great difficulty. I've shared it with Terry in private. you you get blown away. It's like Taliban times multiplied by 1,000, and these people are being celebrated, in all gurdwaras. So if we can put, like the American government takes notice, like in gurdwaras they are celebrating guys like these, because that that's whom they respect. If they charge one gurdwara for hate speech, 100 others would fall in line. So that's, I think, that's where radicalization is starting. The community is breaking. That is the root of the entire problem. Is this Khalistani Gurdwaras and the unchecked hate that goes on there.
I agree, Puneet, and our report does talk about, how gurdwaras were taken over in some cases, including in San Francisco and other places, how gurdwaras are used. But as I'm sure you understand, the US law has a very high bar for hate speech. And at the end of the day, all we can say is, in our report, that the US law enforcement should examine what is being said by people and should, based on US law, take action. We cannot do anything more than that. We can point them in the direction. We can sort of share incidents which we believe violate US law. But at the end of the day, the US law enforcement will need to do it, and based on US laws about hate speech and violating hate speech.
I agree, ma'am. I respect and I really value that this country has like strong laws protecting free speech. Otherwise, if you are a bit lax, like you have in Canada, you have to run from pillar to post and just suffer a lawsuit after lawsuit like Terry is going through. So I'm really grateful to be in America. But I'm just saying, like for example, this guy Jinda who has killed Vaidya, he's like basically Osama bin Laden and Zawahiri and Soleimani all together, and his crimes are documented and accepted, and he's being doing. And I think the sorry, the U.S. government doesn't know what's happening.
Sort of, so what I would say is that the US law enforcement has a lot on its hands, and so US law enforcement does not necessarily go after events, but they do sometimes. I mean, the case which we cited about the San Francisco Gurdwara, it took the FBI a few years, almost a decade, but they did end up finding out and following up on what was happening there. So sometimes, for all we know, they are investigating, but their process takes a very long period of time. And maybe sort of, the more that they are sent information about these things, because the FBI does accept information from American citizens about what is happening, the more they may have material to look out for. So maybe, your friends or others who have information should share it with the FBI and let them know what is happening, so that it adds to their database on this activity.
Yep. Thank you, ma'am. And now we move to our second speaker, Terry. The stage is yours if you'd like to share about your book and also your paper for the McDonald-Laurier Institute. I think, and also your documentary, which preceded that. And I think uh, I make an explicit mention of the documentary because that got the biggest lawsuit, like $151 million, if I'm not wrong.
I think it was only 136 million, but that it seemed. But maybe you're accounting for inflation. At the time in 2007, I must say that it did make me feel very important to be sued for that much money, and of course the lawsuit came to nothing, and there's never any there. This is one of the characteristics that we encounter in the political sphere when discussing Sikh politics and political involvement in Western democracies generally. And that is the idea that they don't seem to live in the world of evidence. They will say, well, what you said was terrible and bad and wrong. Okay, well, you say what was wrong? What identify what factual errors do you find in the documentary or the report or whatever it is they want to sue about? And they always have terrible trouble with this. They don't live in that world. Truth is and evidence, that's another world, and they're not. That's not what they're about. And this is what we encounter all the time. But to broaden the discussion just a little bit, the problem that we have in Canada specifically, I'll just say a couple of words about this, is that um, most people don't understand, or everything we're talking about today is a rather specialized field. This is not something that is on the breakfast table conversation of Canadian or British or Australian or German families. This is a very obscure backwater of contemporary politics, and most people are completely unaware that there is any movement that might espouse revolutionary violence overseas that is at work in domestic politics in the democracies. They're wrong about that. There are people who are getting involved in Canadian politics who we should not trust and should not have the influence that they do. But it's ignorance that is causing people to just look the other way. So, for example, for more than a decade, a few of us have been calling attention to the alarming fact of these posters of martyrs in major gurdwaras all over Canada, and most significantly, the great big poster of Parmar, the Air India bomber, on the outside of the Dashmesh Darbar temple in Surrey, British Columbia, which is a very important temple, where as many as 100,000 people can be seen at the Vaisakhi parade each year, including very often uh, uh, politicians seeking to see and to be seen and to shake hands and to be wearing Indian costume in the hope of winning the votes of the Sikh community. And there they learn, or they're told anyway, falsely, that the people who really represent the Sikh community are the Khalistanis. Now, I've talked about this before. It isn't true. They don't represent the Sikh community, but they say they do, and people are easily fooled because they don't know any better because of the ignorance that I described. So that's the first thing. Indians often point fingers at Canada and say, "Why aren't you cracking down? Why don't you wake up to this? Why don't you do something about it?" And the answer is, we don't know anything about it. Canadians, Germans, British, they don't know anything about it, except for a very small minority, and it's old news anyway. There's no current revolution going on. There's no fighting in the streets. There's no bombs going off in political offices and political rallies in Canada. So they ignore it. They say, this is all old news. It's not happening anymore. Well, um, unfortunately, these people are still there, and to me and to people who think like me, it is an abomination and an obscenity to see the man who is, in fact, Canada's worst ever mass murderer by far, Dalvinder Parmar, honored as a martyr and as a model for Sikh youth with life-size posters on a major gurdwara in a big city in Canada. So that's the first thing on the. I don't see a change very much in this trend. Politicians just shy away from this issue. They don't see any way to win it, and most significantly, it's not a bone of contention between political parties in Canada because they all do it. I can't point the finger at you because you'll just point it back at me. My guys are doing the same thing. So it's not a political winner to complain about it because, well, if the Conservatives blame the Liberals can turn around and do the same thing to the Conservatives. And even the leftist party in Canada, the New Democratic Party, is led, as you probably know, by Jagmeet Singh, who basically made his career by identifying with hardline Sikh activists and Khalistani activists who were out to win political influence. So that's one thing on the politics at play domestically. So the other thing I'll say is a note, and I think that it's been alluded to already, but I just wanted to underline this one other point. We have now a different, changing geopolitical situation which affects the Khalistan movement, and that is the close embrace between Pakistan and China. I mentioned this as being significant because as Pakistan gradually becomes a wholly owned subsidiary of China and is ever more closely in China's orbit and tied to China's trading system through the Belt and Road Initiative, through the tens of billions of dollars that are being invested by China, supposedly in loans, but I don't see Pakistan paying much of them back. Um, this is becoming an important issue for Indian politicians, of course, and Indian strategists, because they can see where this leads. China has already been toying with the idea, and publicly, in the official media in China, like the Global Times, for example, the English language newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party. In other words, not semi-official but official Chinese press. We've seen articles saying, for example, that, well, I think Indian politicians certainly should remember that if they are going to support the independence of Taiwan, which of course China considers part of its own territory, well, then China might just start supporting independence movements in India. So, my point being that we don't need to wait for perhaps seeing in the future the first shot fired on that front. It's already happening. It's already happening that China and Pakistan are becoming one enemy on the northern border rather than two, rather than a war fought on two fronts. It's one war on one front, uh, and it doesn't matter to Pakistan or China whether Khalistan ever comes to pass. That's not their interest. Their interest is only, as Pakistan's interest has always been, in undermining India, in causing India to bleed, bleed by 1,000 cuts. This was the original plan when Pakistan took up the Khalistan cause. It wasn't because they wanted to make a paradise for the Sikhs. Pakistan, as we've already discussed, certainly isn't a paradise for Sikhs, but it's for their own geopolitical interests. And I think that with the advent of the Chinese Pakistan axis and alliance, um, that's not going anything. It's not going to become less troublesome in the years ahead. Those are the only points I wanted to make at this stage. And I think it'd be good if we got to questions.
Thank you, Terry. Great to listen to you as always. We certainly have a lot of questions, but I'll give an opportunity to Aparna ji or Tarek ji. Tarek ji, welcome. If they have like quick questions for you, if they have questions of their own. And I'll also like to make an announcement that for our audience, we really value your questions as well. So please back channel your questions to Parth and Sam. And after we get done with this, we'll try to have at least 10-15 minutes of question answer session, and we'll try to include as many as possible. Thank you. Aparna ji or Tarek ji, would you have a comments or a question for Terry?